Whenever we adjust a sensor, whenever we recalibrate a sensor, we need to get the console into calibration mode. Basically what we need to do is remove the rear cover and come to the lower left-hand corner, and there's a switch down here for calibration. You need to go ahead and turn that on. And what you'll notice on the screen once you've done that is it now says warning, calibration switch on. This needs to be done anytime you calibrate any of the variables, whether it's angle, length, or the transducers, or if you're on the phone and we're actually making an adjustment to a load reader. So we're going to go ahead and do an angle calibration, and before we do that, we need to determine when we need to go ahead and check it. If you believe your angle is giving you an incorrect value, you would want to go ahead and measure it and determine whether or not we're actually showing you the wrong angle, and that's the first case. The second time when you would need to redo the cal is if you replace the circuit board up here. The circuit board contains the values for both length and angle. So if you have to replace the board due to any other reason, you would need to recalibrate both length and angle. In order to calibrate the angle, you need a digital angle level, such as this. So what you would do is lower the boom, you would attach your angle measuring device here, and take a look at what we've got for an indication. Now we need to get that value into the console. So we know what the value is on our digital level, and now we want to go ahead and calibrate our system. So we're going to push button number 1, which is the mode button. We're going to scroll down and select calibration, hit the check mark. It's going to ask us for a password. The password is 1, 2, 3, 4. And that puts us into the calibration menu. So what we're going to do is calibrate the angle. So we're going to go to select sensor, make sure that angle 1 is highlighted, and hit the check mark. Now it's ready to calibrate the angle sensor. We're going to come down, hit select zero sensor, and hit the check mark. And what we're going to do here is hit the check mark one more time, and it's going to highlight this block right here. And that is where I would now enter the angle which I measured off of my digital level. And you do that by scrolling up or down with these two buttons. Once you have the value that you want, you can go ahead and hit the check mark. It saves the value, and you don't want to touch the console but through any button selections while it's in the saving process. If you do, it may not actually save the data. We've just calibrated the angle, and that's all that we need to do. However, the best thing to do with this is to keep your digital level on your boom, and now boom it up to 60 degrees, and make sure that our angle sensor indicates approximately the same value as the digital level. Whenever we adjust a sensor, whenever we recalibrate a sensor, we need to get the console into calibration mode. Basically what we need to do is remove the rear cover and come to the lower left-hand corner, and there's a switch down here for calibration. You need to go ahead and turn that on. And what you'll notice on the screen once you've done that is it now says warning, calibration switch on. This needs to be done anytime you calibrate any of the variables, whether it's angle, length, or the transducers, or if you're on the phone and we're actually making an adjustment to a load reader. We're going to discuss the length calibration. The length potentiometer sits right here, and it spins this gear off of an internal gear on the internal shaft. When you would need to make this calibration is after you have replaced this potentiometer, or if you've replaced the circuit board. Now there is a method of making a length adjustment which doesn't require recalibrating if you have not replaced any parts. We're going to discuss that also. But first we're going to go ahead and cover the calibration itself. So let's say we've already replaced our length sensor, which is the potentiometer, or we've replaced the circuit board. What we're going to want to do is begin the calibration process. So we're going to come in and go to Diagnostics and hit the check mark. What we're going to see here is length 1. And what I want for length 1, when it's fully retracted, is a digital value under AIN1 of 100. You can achieve that by making sure that your boom is fully retracted. And then what you do is you rotate the potentiometer to change this value. And you, as I said, you want it to read 100. At that point, you would then engage the gears in the cable reel and secure your potentiometer bracket in place. After you do that, we can go ahead and begin the calibration process. So what we want to do is go over to calibration mode now and enter the password 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to make sure that we have the correct sensor selected. So it's already sitting on select sensor. We're going to hit the check mark, drop it down to length 1, hit the check mark again, and now we're going to drop it down to 0 the sensor. So after we're in here to 0 the sensor, what you're going to see is you've got a 100 for your digital value, and you've got a 0.1 in this case, or 0.0 for your actual zeroing of your length. So what you would do here is simply press the check mark to highlight it, and we want this to be at 0. So you would simply hit the check mark again, and it would save the value. And that's all you do for zeroing the sensor. The next thing you would want to do is span the sensor. You drop down to span, hit the check mark, and at this point you would fully extend your boom. And the number that you're going to put into here is going to be the difference between a fully retracted boom and a fully extended boom, because what we're measuring is the throw of the boom as it extends. For instance, if you have a 20-foot retracted boom and a 60-foot extended boom, this value would be 40. So you would extend your boom all the way out and enter the value of how far your boom has traveled. What you're going to see is when you are retracted, you had a 100 here, but your digital value is going to increase. It may read 400 or 500 by the time you get your boom extended. That's what it's supposed to do. So you would enter your value, hit the check mark to save it, and wait for the changes approved message to go away before you do anything else with the system. That ensures that the value actually gets saved. So after you've gone ahead and you've done your zeroing and you've spanned by fully extending the boom and inserting the value that we spanned the boom by, what you're going to do is come back and you're going to fully retract your boom and take a look at it on the main screen. Take a look at this value here, which is your boom length. Make sure that your boom length is reading accurate. Then go ahead and fully extend it and then fully retract it, and make sure that both at the extended value and the fully retracted value you have an accurate indication. At that point, you're all finished with the calibration of the length sensor. You can go ahead and turn off your calibration switch and put the rear cover back on the console. Whenever we adjust a sensor, whenever we recalibrate a sensor, we need to get the console into calibration mode. Basically what we need to do is remove the rear cover and come to the lower left-hand corner, and there's a switch down here for calibration. You need to go ahead and turn that on. And what you'll notice on the screen once you've done that is it now says warning, calibration switch on. This needs to be done anytime you calibrate any of the variables, whether it's angle, length, or the transducers, or if you're on the phone and we're actually making an adjustment to a load reader. All right, we're going to discuss transducer calibration. In order to determine whether or not your transducers are good, of course, first you have to know what they're supposed to be indicating in a known state. If you go to section 7 in the troubleshooting guide, I'm going to discuss what I'm about to do. So right now I'm in diagnostics. In case you forgot how to get there, hit button number 1. You get your menu, scroll down, select diagnostics, and hit the check mark. What I want to look at is TX0 and TX1, which is the last page in diagnostics. The only part I'm looking at is the actual values for TX0 and TX1. The rest of the stuff that appears on this page isn't really applicable to what we're doing. This crane is showing me a -2 value for TX0, and currently it's showing me a -1 on TX1. My boom is all the way down, so there should be no pressure in the cylinder. If I go ahead and boom it up, what I've got is 21 or 20 and a 0. That's a good indication for a boom that's slightly raised. But when you take it all the way down, what you're supposed to have is 0.0 to 3.0 for both TX1 and TX0. I've got a -2, and right now I'm reading a 0 for TX1. So TX1 is okay, it's marginal, it's moving between -1 and 0. But TX0 is a -2 value, and we need to change that. We need to get it back to between 0.0 and 3.0. And we're going to show you how to do that. This is the transducer box. This is a 33M0078. Most of the cranes made after 2009, perhaps, have this transducer box. If it's made earlier than that, you'll have two of these. They're model number 33M0077, and they'll be side by side. One of them will read the bore sensor, the other will read the rod. On the 78 version, one box reads both. What you need to know is where these two objects are right here. This little silver object, there's two of them. One is for your calibration of the bore, and the other is for the calibration of the rod. There's a little switch sticking down on the bottom of them, and when we span the sensor, these switches need to be thrown for the sensor that you are spanning. So after you've done the 0 of your bore transducer, you're going to do a span of the bore transducer. In order to span it, you push this button on the left-hand little silver switch to the right, and that will give you the correct value in order to do the span of the bore transducer. What you also need to know is on the transducers themselves, there is an inscribed number. The one closest to the hydraulic fitting is the transducer calibration value for that transducer, such as 278.3. That's approximately what these will show. That is the span value. So when you go to span your transducer, you'll be coming over here, throwing the switch, and then you'll be going into the console under the span pressure transducer selection, and you'll be entering that value off of your transducer into the highlighted box. We're going to show you that in a few minutes. The other thing you need to know is these two transducers are specific. Normally, there's a label on them indicating which one is the bore and which one is the rod. If it doesn't have a label on it, you're going to have to revert back to either your own knowledge on the system or a hydraulic data which shows you which port is for the rod and which port is for the bore. So we're going to go ahead and calibrate the pressure transducer. Let's go back to diagnostics and take a look at what we have. So we're going to hit button 1, going to use button 2 to get us to highlight diagnostics, and then hit the check mark. Then we're going to scroll down using button 3 to TX0 and TX1. What we have here is both are indicating -2. So we're going to actually calibrate both of these. The section 7 of the troubleshooting guide will tell you that the value when the boom is all the way down and there's no pressure in the cylinder should be between 0.0 and 3.0. If you're above or below that value, then the system is not going to give you an accurate weight measurement. So let's go over to the calibration mode. We're going to hit the escape button. Button number 1, highlight calibration, hit the check mark, and enter the password, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to scroll down to select pressure transducer. And hit the check mark. We're going to make sure that we're on mode 1, which is the bore. We're going to hit the check mark again. And now we're going to drop down to 0 pressure. Hit the check mark. And what we're looking at here is our -2 and a digital value of 304. The digital value has to be above 100. If you're below 100, you run the risk of having the system tell you that you're out of range. If you're at 100, odds are you have either a bad pressure transducer or you have a bad transducer box. It's easy to figure out which one is which simply by swapping your transducer inputs into the box from the TX1 side or TX0 side over to the TX1 side. If the 100 tracks where you put the wires, the problem is in the transducer. If the 100 value stays on the, let's say, the TX0 side, then the problem is in the transducer box and it needs to be replaced. If you replace the transducer box, you need to recalibrate the bore and the rod transducers. So right now, we've got a good value here of 305, and our negative 2.2 needs to be changed. So what we're going to do is hit button number 4, and it's going to highlight that box where the negative 2.2 was and go to 0, which is what we want it to do. So we're going to hit the check mark again, and it's going to save the value. The next thing we're going to do is span the sensor, which is item number 6, span pressure. So we drop down, we hit the check mark to select it, and it's telling us that we're looking at a span for load 1. The current reading is negative 2.2 with a digital value of about 305. What we're going to do now is throw the calibration switch for the bore in this pressure transducer box. Once we do that, the sensor value is going to go up over 1,000, and then we're going to hit the check mark, and the value right now that shows negative 2.2 will go to 300. I'm going to go ahead and throw the switch, and then we'll come back and we'll see what we have here. All right, we're over here at the pressure transducer box, and what we want to do is throw the switch for the bore side, and that's the one here on the left. Sticking out the bottom of this thing is a teeny little black stub. That's what we're going to be pushing over, and you can actually hear it click, or you can feel it click into position. The easiest way to throw this switch is using a small implement, either a very small screwdriver or a ballpoint pen. In this case, I'm using a small Allen wrench, but you need to be very careful when you're in here so that you don't short anything out. This cannot be done with power turned off. So you just come in, you flip the switch over, and we'll go ahead and take a look at what we have on the console. So we've thrown the switch on the pressure transducer box, and what we see is a 3200 value reading. That's a correct indication. The span value has now gone up to 277. But we need to change that because that's not the correct value that's inscribed on the side of the bore transducer. So we're going to hit the check mark, and this value goes to 300 for the span value. Now what we need to do is change that to the actual value that's on the transducer, which was 279.3. So we do that by hitting button number 3 to scroll down. And the longer you hold this button down, the faster it starts to go. So you need to be careful so that you don't waste time overshooting. 279.3. Then hit the check mark. Once the change is approved, you can hit the escape button, come back to diagnostics, scroll down to TX1 and TX0, and you're going to see a 297 over here because that's the value that we just set it for. Once I turn off the calibration switch in the transducer box, that should go to 0.0 to 3.0. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we can see what we have afterwards. All right, I have turned off the calibration switch in the transducer box, and TX0 is now down to 0.0, which is where it should be. Now we need to do the same thing for the TX1 side. All right, so we're going to go ahead and calibrate the rod side now. So we're going to hit the escape button. We're going to hit the mode, drop back down to calibration, hit the check mark, and enter the password. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to scroll down to select pressure transducer. Hit the check mark, highlight load 2, which is the rod side, and hit the check mark. Now we're going to drop down to 0 the pressure, hit the check mark, and again we have a 300 value and we're also showing our negative 2.3 currently. So we're going to hit the check mark here. It goes to 0, and we hit the check mark again to save it. Drop down to span pressure, and up here it says we're spanning load 2. It's showing us our 320-ish and our negative 2.3. So now we go ahead and throw the calibration switch in the transducer box for the bore side. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll take a look at the console afterwards. So we've thrown the calibration switch for the rod side in the transducer box. We've gone up to a 3000 value, and we're showing 275.9-ish. So what we're going to do is hit the check mark, and it highlights that 270 goes to 300, and we're going to drop that down to the value that's inscribed on the body of the rod transducer, which was 277.9. We hit button number 3 and start dropping it down. We're at 277.9, and we hit the check mark. It saves the value, and now we hit the escape, go over to diagnostics, and come out to TX1 and TX0. And what we're going to see here is our 277 value. After I turn off the calibration switch, this should go to 0.0 to 3.0. So we've turned off the calibration switch for the rod side. TX1 has now gone down to 0.0, and essentially the calibration of your transducers is now complete. What you need to do at this point is, you still have your warning here for your calibration switch being turned on. So you come back to here, turn that off. The warning has gone away. Put the cover back on your console, and you're done.